This is Dr. Rebecca Johansson, running and triathlon coach with the Performance Project. You can find us at theperformance-project.com. Today's sports science mini lecture is on the relationships between performance and pacing at the Two Oceans Marathon. This research study was part of my PhD data that I did at the University of Cape Town, and my supervisors were Professor Mike Lambert and Dr. Jurian Swart. We're first going to take a look at the course profile. So the Two Oceans Marathon is a road ultramarathon that's 56 Ks in distance, and it's in Cape Town, South Africa. We divided the course into 4 segments because this is where they had timing mats, so we could get split times at these 4 different segments for the runners. So segment 1 is from the start to the 28K mark. So it's actually the first half of the race. And when we look at the course profile, compared to the rest of the course, it's relatively flat and fast first half. Segment 2 is from the 28K mark to the 42K mark. And this includes going up and over Chapman's Peak. So the first of 2 major climbs of the race. And we can see a picture, a viewpoint from Chapman's Peak in that picture on the left, the panoramic picture. And that little piece of road you see on the right, that's Chapman's Peak Drive. So once runners hit the top of Chapman's Peak, they run down, and Chapman's Peak Drive is cut into the side of the mountain, and runners run all the way down into Hout Bay, which is the view that you see in the sea. Segment 3 is from the 42K mark to the 50K mark, and this includes climbing up Constantia Neck. So it's the second major climb of the race. And in the picture on the right, that picture was taken from the top of Constantia Neck. So it's the same mountains as the picture on the left, but just now rearranged differently. And so runners are running from the bottom of the picture in Hout Bay, and they run all the way up to the top of Constantia Neck. And then segment 4 was the final 6 Ks of the race. And compared to segment 2 and segment 3, it's a relatively flat and fast finish. So what we did was we looked at pacing as a whole. So we had 7,327 runners. And in this graph on the x-axis, you have race distance. And on the y-axis, you have normalized running speed. So normalized running speed was calculated by taking each runner's race speed for each segment divided by their mean overall race speed times 100. So it becomes a percentage. So taken as an entire group, in the first half of the race, runners are running at an average of 110% of their overall race speed, which makes sense based on the course profile. Then they progressively get relatively slower until the 50K mark. And like we said, that last 6 Ks is pretty flat and fast. And then they have a relative increase in their running speed. But the main aim of the study was looking at how pacing differs between performance level. So we split the runners up into 4 quartiles based on their finishing times. And then we looked at differences in the 4 different segments. And what we found in this graph, we've got A, B, C, and D, and it's each of the 4 segments. And then on the x-axis, you've got quartiles 1, 2, 3, and 4. So runners in quartile 4 were the slowest, 25% of runners, and quartile 1 represents the fastest, 25% of runners. So in segment 1, that's the first half of the race, pretty flat and fast. Runners in quartiles 3 and 4, so the slower runners, run at a relatively faster speed than the runners in quartile 1. And the differences are considered small when we ran the statistics. So there's a difference, but it's pretty small. Then in graph B, in segment 2, Now they're going up and over Chapman's Peak, so that first major climb. And the graph compared to segment 1 basically switches, which was really interesting. So in segment 2, the runners in quartile 1 ran faster than the runners in all the other quartiles. And some of the differences were considered small and some considered moderate. So the faster runners are really running up and over Chapman's Peak at a pretty hard effort. In graph C, in segment 3, now runners are running up to the top of Constantia Neck. And what we see is that across all 4 quartiles, they run at a similar relative running speed. So now all the runners are running at pretty much the same relative running speed, which is interesting for that second climb. And then in the final segment, in the last 6Ks, what we see is that runners in quartiles 2, 3, and 4 are finishing at a relatively faster running speed compared to the runners in quartile 1. So some of these results are in line with previous research on pacing, but some of the results are really unique. And I think we discussed several reasons why in my PhD thesis, but a few interesting ones are that across the quartiles for 2 oceans, the faster runners, the medium finishers, and the slower finishers, they all had the same experience level in terms of previous number of 2 oceans that they've ran. So obviously these small differences and the slower runners being able to sort of make a comeback in segment 3 and segment 4 might be because they actually have a similar experience level in terms of running the course, understanding pacing, and how it should go as the course goes on. And a second thing to consider is that pace setters or running buses is quite a popular thing, particularly for slower runners, because they want to make sure that they're finishing under the cutoff time. So it could be that more runners in quartiles 3 and quartiles 4 were running with a pace setter, so they were able to finish, especially from the 42 to 56K mark, they were able to kind of stick with the bus and hold good pacing. So those are just 2 of the conclusions that came up in this study.